All right, today we will be reading, um, we're going to call it it's from Bad Boy. Bad Boy is a novel that Walter Dean Myers wrote. And since it says from Bad Boy, that means it's just a part of it. It's not, I don't even know if it's a full chapter from the book. It's just a little, what we call an excerpt of the story. So here's some background information. In his memoir, which means it's like an autobiography, but it's just a moment in his life. Walter Dean Myers describes his childhood growing up in Harlem, New York in the 1940s and 1950s. This excerpt, I used the word right there, means just that part, takes place when Myers is in elementary school. Earlier in this chapter, his teacher, Mrs. Conway, lent, which means gave him, books to read after noticing his interest in reading. I will tell you a little bit about this. I don't exactly remember if it mentions it in the story. He is a black man, or I guess a black boy in this thing. In this story, during this time, we still have a lot of segregation. We still have, I know we do now, but there were still some schools that were just for blacks and just for whites. And there was still a ton of discrimination going on with the black community. So it was pretty much you stayed with all of the blacks or all the whites. You didn't cross that line. So here is part of this chapter. There were two categories of friends in my life: those with whom I played ball and everyone else. Athletes were highly respected in the black community, and boys my age were encouraged to play some sport. I loved playing ball. I would play basketball in the mornings with boys who were just reaching their teens. Then stoop ball or punch ball on the block with boys my age. Sometimes Eric and I would go down to the courts on Riverside Drive and play there. And I was a bad, bad loser. Most of my prayers, when they weren't for the Dodgers, and they gave us a number 1, so we have to go down right there. Brooklyn Dodgers, an American professional baseball team, which moved to Los Angeles, California after the 1957 season. So he's praying for his baseball team to win. Okay, starting the sentence over, because that's what you need to do when you get to a word that you have to go look up. Most of my prayers, when they weren't for his team, the Dodgers, were quick ones in the middle of a game, asking God to let me win. I liked other sports as well and even followed the New York Rangers hockey team in the papers for a while until I found out that all of the references to ice just meant that they were skating on ice. There wasn't any ice to skate on in Harlem, so I gave up hockey. So I'm going to go over this really quick. This has a ton of cultural information here. So we're talking about the black community, and he says if you were an athlete, you were respected. And so he hung out with boys. He played ball. He played stoop ball, which is a special kind of a stoop. I'm going to pause because that's the only way I'm going to be able to show you instead of tell you. All right, so a stoop are the steps leading up to the top right here, which would be called the porch, maybe. And then this would be the entry of the home. Here, it looks like some people are playing it with like some baseball. I don't know exactly how it's played, but it looks really interesting. It looks like it includes like a baseball and a bat. This is a image right here. So this would look like what the row of houses could have possibly looked like to him. Okay, so he was playing the stoop ball, and he I also think it's really important to point out that he he was paying attention to this hockey team. But then he found out that hockey is played on ice, and he made no connection to ice. There's no place to skate in Harlem, so he just was like, never mind. With school out and me not having access to Miss Conway's cash, I've got to go down and look, hidden supply. So he had a hidden supply of what? Of books. I rediscovered the George Bruce branch of the public library on 125th Street. Sometimes on rainy days I would sit in the library and read. The librarians also always suggested books that were too young for me. That's an interesting thing to put in a story. So I'm guessing the librarians were looking at him and making some kind of judgment, like, oh, he needs to read a book for someone younger. But that didn't discourage him. He still went on a regular basis. He says, I could never have afforded to buy the books and was pleased to have the library with its free supply. So he really enjoys reading. Being a boy meant to me that I was not particularly like girls. Most of the girls I knew couldn't play ball, and that excluded them from most of what I wanted to do with my life. Dorothy Dodson, daughter of the Wicked Witch. Okay, gotta look that. Walter's nickname for Mrs. Dodson, a neighbor he dislikes. Okay, so Dorothy Dodson. This is the name of the girl is Dorothy. The mother he calls Wicked Witch because he doesn't like her. So Dorothy read books, and I know she did, but she couldn't stand me and was more than happy to tell me on a number of occasions. Sometimes I would see other children on the trolley with books under their arms and suspected that they were like me somehow. I felt a connection with these readers, but I didn't know what the connection was. I knew there were things going on in my head, a fantasy life, that somehow corresponded to the books I read. I also felt a kind of comfort with books that I did not experience when I was away from them. Away from books, I was, at times, almost desperate to fill up the spaces of my life. Books filled those spaces for me. So let me explain this paragraph a little bit. Of course, he's in elementary school. There's this girl, his neighbor, it looks like. Her name's Dorothy. She read books a lot, but she didn't like him, so he couldn't talk to her about any books. Sometimes he saw other kids with books, and he kind of was like, ooh, I wonder if they like to read like me, but he didn't really know how to talk to them. And then this last part talks about him with why he liked books. The books that he read gave him a way to escape his reality. Just like a lot of us right now use social media or game systems to kind of if we're feeling stressed, I just can't deal with it anymore, that type of thing. I'm going to go do this for a little bit. So that's what he used books for when he was feeling stressed and needed to just get away from life. All right. Paragraph 4. As much as I enjoyed reading, in the world in which I was living, it had to be a secret vice. Vice is a bad habit. So he's saying that reading where he's living, a boy reading, is not good. So I'm got a little confused on that. Why would it be bad for a boy not to like to read? Remember our time though. What was our time frame? 1940s and 1950s. Got to think of what might have been going on during that time. Okay, when I brought a book home from the library, I would sometimes run into older kids who would tease me about my reading. They made it clear not what boys did. Okay, so he's fighting with that boys don't read type of thing. And though by now I was fighting older boys and don't mind that one bit, for some reason I didn't want to fight about books. Okay, so he's telling that he's okay. He's kind of tough. He fights boys, but he doesn't want to fight because he likes to read. He says books were special and said something about me that I didn't want to reveal. So he began to take a brown paper bag to the library to bring his books home in. So he liked reading so much he was really willing to risk getting in a fight and being made fun of. But he would take a brown paper bag and shove the books in there so it looked like he wasn't carrying any books. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second just to make sure I have enough time in my video. Oh, actually I do for sure. Okay, paragraph 5. That year, I learned that being a boy meant I was supposed to do certain things and act a certain way. I was very comfortable being a boy, but there were times when the role was uncomfortable. We often played ball in the church gym, and one rainy day, along with my brother Mickey and some of my guys, I went to the gym, only to find a bevy of girls exercising on one half of the court. We wanted to run a full court game, so we directed a few nasty remarks to the other side of the small gym. Then we saw that the girls were doing some kind of dance, so we imitated them, cracking ourselves up. I'm going to pause a moment and then I will be back to explain that paragraph. Okay, so he's just describing, he's having a flashback of an experience when he was in the gym and they wanted to play a full court game of basketball, which means they use both sides of the hoops. Oops, there. But there was a group of girls that were dancing. And so the boys started making some mean remarks about them. And they started pretending to dance like them, and they were laughing. Okay, so let's see what happens with that. When the girls had finished their dancing, they went through some stretching exercises. A teenager, L'Oreal Henry, was leading the group, and she was pretty. So we sent a few woo-hoos her way. I bet you guys can't even do these stretching exercises, L'Oreal challenged. We scoffed, as expected. That means like, oh, whatever. If you can do these exercises, we'll get off the court, L'Oreal said. If not, you go through the whole dance routine with us. Woo, challenge. It was a way to get rid of the girls, and we went over to do the exercises. None of us was limber, which is flexible. And now I just lost my place. None of us was limber enough to do the stretching exercises, and soon we were all trying to look as disgusted as we could while we hopped around the floor to the music. They danced to the music as a poem was being read. I liked the poem, which turned out to be the creation by James Weldon Johnson. I liked dancing too, but I had to pretend that I didn't like it. No big deal. I was already keeping reading and writing poems a secret. Now I would just add dancing.